All right, thank you all for coming to the next in our postdoc talk series. Today we have Emily Wickline, who's a first-year postdoc in cell biology in the lab of Adam Kwiatkowski. And her research, when she's not spending all her time on CVs, which I hope she's not, is understanding how actin networks are assembled and organized to regulate cell morphology and cell-cell adhesion. So, Emily, take it away.
Thank you. So thanks for coming, guys. Today, I think we'll do a workshop on how to prepare a CV, but it's not going to be quite the formal lecture style as maybe a class. So feel free to ask questions whenever you have them, and we'll try to keep it interactive, because sometimes just listing CV topics might get repetitive. So again, ask questions when you have them. So we'll start off by just giving some objectives for the seminar. Really, I hope at the end we can appreciate the difference between a CV and a resume, and then understand the parts of a CV and the proper formatting for that form, and then be able to recognize the importance of tailoring your CV or your application for different PhD career avenues. And lastly, if you brought your CV, and if we have time in the second hour or after the slides, we could do a roundtable review of CVs if you have them, to try to take what you've learned here and practice it, and also to help your fellow scientists with your CV. Because really, I think you become so attached to your CV that maybe you become blinded by most things, and you maybe won't see your own spelling errors or grammatical errors because you see it so often. So it's really good in any circumstance to actually have someone else review it to see where you might have some errors. Okay, so in the end, we really want to create an effective CV for your professional profile. So to start, we'll go over what's the difference between a CV and a resume. So when I first started looking into this topic, I really thought that CV was more for, here's this. I wasn't quite aware of the differences between a CV and a resume. I know we all know CVs are really long and resumes are short. And you think that the CVs are for non-science careers, the resumes for non-science careers, and the CV is for the science careers. But when in fact there's different times when actually you would use either a CV or resume in the science community as well. So a CV really focuses on where you've been, whereas a resume focuses on where you're going. Again, like I said, CVs have unlimited length, when resumes are really a snapshot of what you want to present to, let's say, an employer at that moment in your career. So it's really 1 to 2 pages. CV within the scientific community has a full list of all publications, where a resume, if you list publications at all, they're only selected for the specific career job path that you're applying to or giving the resume to. And then lastly, like I said, CVs are more or less for the academic and research avenues, where resumes are actually incorporated into the scientific community. And one of the big places where it's found is in industry. However, as we'll go over later when we talk about tailoring your CV for different PhD avenues, the industry resume is really almost a hybrid CV and resume. So it's not quite as black and white as it's black and white as I thought it was. And maybe it'll open your eyes to the differences as well. So whether you're writing a CV or a resume, the first thing you want to understand is real estate. So what I mean by real estate, one of the big concepts in real estate is location, location, location. So with your CV and resume, you always want to put the most relevant information first, especially on the first page, the first line towards the left. You really want to make it stand out. You don't want to hide it in all these words in your CV or resume. again, some of this can get boring, but it's really important to understand. Formatting issues are a huge filter in looking in job searches. So if your CV is illegible, nobody's going to take the time to give you any consideration. So you want to make sure that you're able to communicate effectively with the person's looking at your CV by having consistent formatting, a good size font, so over a 10 point, and you also want to make sure you have your last name and page number on every part of your CV. When you're having a 30-page CV and somebody drops it, oops, it's not effective anymore. It's also important to maybe put a revision date on the bottom of each page for your CV, because even if you apply to a job, let's say in January, they might not get back to your CV until March, April, and at that point, the document itself is so fluid that you might have more to add, and it would be good for them and for you to know when it was last updated.
So revision date, sorry,
Yeah,
is
no
always
problem.
in the bottom?
You can do it, I think some suggest top, some suggest bottom. I feel like when we're talking about real estate and having the things you want most at the top, it might not be, it's a really important part to have on every page, but maybe not at the top, because you might take away from the bullet points below. But I don't think there's and what you'll hear from me and you'll figure out is there's formats for CVs, right? But it's a fluid document within your own profession, but also, the way people write it is not quite as structured as you'd like. So these things are always up for discussion, and as long as it's, like I said, legible, most things are good. And I found out doing a lot of research, looking at a lot of different CVs, even within the past 5 years, PIs from 5 years ago, right, there's in a different way than PIs now, so it's changing, but again, it's more of a personal call, but for the real estate aspect, I'd say bottom of the page. And last, most important, that is that you want to spell check. Again, this is another filter. If somebody's looking at your CV and you're really looking at applying for a job, being competitive, and you have spelling errors, you've lost your credibility. So this is where maybe it helps to go between students or your peers to have them revise it, because maybe, science is hard to spell check. Maybe you're going to have some issues and you're not going to recognize them yourself. So make sure you, at least at the minimum, do the spell check on Word or whatever program you use, and then have other people look at it for grammar and other spelling errors as well. So again, these are general guidelines for both CVs and resumes. The bottom line is you do not want to make the reviewers work too hard. You want to spoon feed them your information so that they're happy to look at it and appreciate it. So when we look more at a CV specifically, the scope ends up being all your professional accomplishments from college onward. As you grow in your career, the scope might change. So just becoming a new postdoc, I've looked at my CV and actually deleted a lot of my college accomplishments because they're not quite on the same level as the accomplishments of my PhD degree, but that's totally a personal call. If you're at 30 pages in your first year of your postdoc, that's maybe not appropriate unless you've had a ridiculous amount of publications. So you might want to think about moving the scope along with your career. There's some things you're going to want to put on all the time. If you got a really nice award, if you were valedictorian or something in your college, but the little things end up being more trivial and space wasters and fluff. So just think about that when you look at your scope. The length, as we sort of discussed earlier, on a CV is more or less unlimited. But the thing you want to remember is you always want to keep the reader interested. So if you're at a point where they're just lulled to sleep, maybe too much fluff, too much information that's irrelevant, you might want to think about taking it out. And like I said, preparing for this course, I did my own CV and thought, nobody really wants to know that I got an honorable mention on an undergrad poster on a microbiology project in my sophomore year. You know, this is so far removed from where I'm at now that it doesn't really add, it subtracts. And then for the general guidelines, the last thing we want to consider is the organization. It's really one of the most followed formats on the CV is actually the reverse chronological order. That's pretty standard. What you have all probably become aware of in the scientific community, it's all about what have you done for me lately? So you want that at the top, whether it's publications, you know, presentations, service. Again, it's good to list them, and your CV is going to have a long list, but you don't want to go to 4 or 5 pages to see what you're doing right now. You want the present stuff up at the top. It's always good to use bullet points and sectioning. You don't want to get too crazy with it, but you want to help the reader's eyes go to the appropriate spots and make the document skimmable. So that means that if they don't care about your awards and accomplishments, or they don't care about your volunteer activities, they can see, oh, volunteer and service and all this, and they can quickly pass it by and find the things they want, the publications. And the more time you save them, the more time they're going to give to the important parts of your resume. I didn't find any statistics on maybe how long they skim your resume, but it's very short. It's a couple minutes. So if you're going to give them more time to look at the content and not find the content, you're really going to be above most of the resumes and CVs out there. So did everyone get both the handouts that I gave? This University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, which most people are probably a part of, but if you're not, I'm sorry, they actually have a CV format, which they require for their faculty members. So I've given you a copy of this. As graduate students, you're also probably meant to follow this format. So it's kind of nice because it gives you a template for maybe starting your CV and to build, to build upon. I wouldn't say this is the be-all, end-all, but it's a good place to jump off from. And it gives some good details, which we're going to go into a lot of this on what you want in your CV. And this itself is really tailored for an academic career, but it's a good place to start because you have to think the academic career CV is probably the longest you're going to have. So it's better to just have a really long one and cut it for different reasons, for a job, for yourself, for different career options, than to have to add. So it's a good place to start. And that's what I've put up here, just a snippet from the front. So we'll go through the sections of this and try to explain, if we can, the relevant points. So just to list the sections, they usually go in a similar order to this. You first want to start with biographical information, then education and training, appointments, positions, certifications and licensure, memberships in professional and scientific societies, honors and awards, publications, professional activities, and service.
I have a question real
Yes.
quick. For certifications, since we have an interviewing postdoc and I was looking over her CV, she listed like bloodborne pathogens training and responsible conduct of research, and because those are all courses and modules that we have to take, and most of those are NIH requirements, and it just seemed kind of like fluff, but again, is it important to say, oh, I can ship things on dry ice, I've had dangerous goods training?
That's an interesting question. I didn't actually, I've not run into that before, so I'm not sure. I guess it's all in the eye of the beholder. So if maybe they're lacking in other areas, it might be good to have. Again, it's the scope, and maybe it's not fluff if they're a new technician or a new postdoc, but I don't know. We'll go over certification and licensure. You think of that more as like an MD, and the license to practice medicine and those kind of things. But again, it is what you make it. If it's a relevant piece of information, Yeah, I mean, maybe if there was more specialized training, I think it would be better. But you're right, bloodborne pathogens and chemical hygiene and those kind of things are something we all have to have, so you think of them more or less as kind of like when we go into like education, nobody's going to put what high school you went to, because again, that's kind of out of the scope. We understand that you're in this position because you went to high school. So you're in a postdoc position because you had this training and you should know these things. But that's an interesting point. If I find more information, I'll let you know.
One quick question. So, the personal information, some people keep the personal information at the end of the CV, but I don't
I've heard on everything, no, at the top. Again, they want to know who you are. Again, like I said, it's real estate, but they need to be able to contact you too. So
not the biographical, but like hobbies, spouse, children, things like that.
So let's go into what I put on the slides. A lot of those kind of things you actually want to keep off your professional resume, because they're not allowed to ask, and you probably don't want to put it forward. Unfortunately, as open-minded as we want to think every person in the world is, some things like visa status, marital status, kids can actually, they might hurt or they might help you, but again, as an HR perspective, they're not allowed to ask you, so I wouldn't put it on there, because it can lead to things like, oh, are they going to need childcare? Are they going to only be here 8 hours a day? Are they not going to be able to work weekends? Oh, they have hobbies. They like to do something that requires going away for 10 days at a time. It's totally a personal call, but I've heard hobbies definitely no, and the other ones just kind of open yourself for unfortunate criticisms. With the biographical section, again, it's at the top, it's your real estate. You want to make it short and sweet, but effective. So really, everybody puts their name on the top usually. When you do that, if you have a degree, put your degree name. You earned it. Don't just put Emily Wickline, because I could be any person, but I'll put Emily Wickline PhD because that's the degree I have and part of the education I'm trying to sell. For those who maybe changed their name, you can actually add under your name. I've heard you add NEE and then your previous names, because sometimes publications get lost or it gets confusing if you're highlighting your authorship as different names. So that would be helpful to the reviewers. Next, you really want to add an email address. We're in a more electronic time, and this is definitely a must-have. But you want to make sure your email address is professional. Don't use something you had as a screen name all the way back in high school. Gmail's great now. You can make a bunch of different accounts. And you want to remember that even though you have a @pitt.edu username now, it's going to expire when you leave this position. So I would encourage you to find a professional email address and start it, keep it, have it, and use that on your CVs, because it shouldn't get lost with different rotations of positions. And again, you still want to add standard contact information, such as your address, your phone, your fax, etc. One thing that I alluded to earlier, though, is how HR looks at this. Now, HR facilities are not usually allowed to contact you at your place of work, so I wouldn't put a work phone number. I wouldn't put a work address. It's irrelevant. They're not really going to do anything about it. It might take up space. Everything I've researched says just don't do it. Fax numbers, since you don't probably have one at home, maybe you don't add this section in your biographical information, but I wouldn't put your work fax, What if you're applying to a job and your boss doesn't know? You get a fax. Probably not a good thing.
Emily, what about putting like a LinkedIn?
That's,
not you wouldn't use Facebook, I don't think.
No, but I think LinkedIn, you know what, I'm still kind of new on the LinkedIn thing, but I do think they have like a web address. I know that I've looked at some tenure track positions, and they have their websites on there, so that is a really good point that I didn't add. if you have some sort of identifying website, and I think LinkedIn is highly considered a professional social networking option, I'd put it on there too. I'd maybe put it as a website, not, I don't know, social something. Yeah, that's a good point. So the don'ts on the biographical section are, don't put your information that's too personal. Don't put your social security number. You don't need to put your date of birth, your marital status, kids, and visa status. Again, these are questions HR can't ask. Well, date of birth, they'll be able to know in social security, but your CV is going to get passed around a lot, and these are points that if somebody needs to know for an HR perspective, you'll be in more contact with them than just your CV. So I just keep them off for the initial go around. So next comes the education and training. So this is really important. This is how you got here. So again, it should go on the first page. The subsections you'll have are going to be undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate, which includes internships, residencies, and fellowships. Postdocs are still considered training, so they would go under education more than any other subtitle. You want to include the dates you've attended, and usually in this section it's months and years because people want to find your graduating class. It's a May or a December. You want the name and location of your school and the degree received. You also want to put a major subject in this heading as well. Now I have a critique of the Pittsburgh School of Medicine CV format because they don't do it in reverse chronological order, but really you shouldn't do undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate, because again, it's what have you done for me lately. PhD should go on top, and then followed by the others. So next section would be something about appointments and positions. So there'll be academic and non-academic. Usually in this section you would include military service or other government positions. Again, as in most of these sections, you're going to include the years, the name, location, and a rank and title. Now, for this group of individuals, you may not be able to complete this section yet because you might not have had appointments. Again, postdoc is training, so it would go under education. So in this case, if you can't fill a heading, don't list it. So you would just keep it off of your CV until you can fill it. Again, so now we can do the certifications and licensures. And to the best of my knowledge, this shouldn't apply to PhDs. If you have an MD or an MD PhD, that's different. But just PhD education, this usually doesn't apply. The subsections, though, if you were to fill this out, would be professional licensure, medical licensure, or specialty certification. I guess when we talked about the different like biohazard and those are general. But I know there's some for like, let's say you had like a large animal training. I think that would probably be something that would be desirable to the employer and you'd want to include because it's more specialized training. Again, include the years in this licensure board and the state. So next is memberships in professional and scientific societies. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but you can do subsections to help the reviewer out. You can do international, national, regional, and local. A lot of times local would be like university ones. There's graduate and professional societies, postdoc associations, and at this scope, at this time in your career, the scope might be appropriate to include these as well. But I would just make delineations between national and local.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In general, what are the requirements to join these societies? Like,
Most of them require membership fees.
that's all? You don't have
Yeah.
to have like a specific degree?
No, so personally I'm a part of a bunch of societies that my graduate lab, the whole lab ended up being parts of it. So a lot of it's kind of grandfathered in, you know, if your PI is a part of it, you're going to be a part of it. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't limit yourself to that if you find a society that you're interested in. Usually there's no requirement that your advisor be a part of it. Sometimes you do need a sponsor for like attending conferences, maybe at a discount rate. But plenty of PI sponsor their like graduate students and postdocs who don't go to those meetings and stuff like that. So usually at this point, even for postdocs, it's usually discounted fees, student and trainee, and that's how you kind of build your way into them.
So, you benefit from these societies because of the conferences they have?
The conferences and the contacts, they're opportunities for you to do service work, so you can serve on committees. It's a super great networking opportunity because you're going to get to know these people, and they're going to be the ones reviewing your grants. They're going to be the ones offering you positions. They're going to be there all the time. So there's different levels, right? There's national and there's local and regional, and there's some good regional ones here, like the Women in Bio is a new one here for women that is a local one that goes national, but you can do a lot of local events. I don't know many others like that, but a lot of the ones I've listed here, these are more national, and a lot of their headquarters are near NIH. And so you wouldn't have like the one-on-one contact as you would have with like a regional group. So if I were to suggest starting with getting in a society, you might want to try a regional group, and then they can, if your lab doesn't have one, try a regional group, and they can open up to national groups. Does that make sense? They're a good thing. You know, I have a husband who's not in science, and he doesn't quite get the paying of the dues and the fees, but it's really, it's not that it's monetary value in this career, but it's something that's good to have and that everybody does. So you want to kind of, it's a good tool to have or use on your resume. But in the end, it's such great for like contacting, or what is it, networking. Networking is the big thing. So.
Do they usually reach out to you when there are things happening, or do you have to
Yes.
personally go over and like ask
No,
to
like,
be a committee?
it's both. You know, I'm on committees for my national, for the ASIP, which is pathology, and at the time my PI was on a committee, and I asked him if I could get on a committee. Since then, I've gotten emails from the committee saying they want trainee members because they're understanding the perspective and the perspective the trainees bring, and also the large constituent group that they are in a lot of these societies. So they've asked more trainees to be a part of this, and surprisingly, a lot don't want to be a part of it. So a lot of those slots are open, even on the national societies. I've not had problems getting those, but you can do it either way. And you know what? As a trainee, and again, postdocs and graduate students are both trainees, they're really looking for your opinions and for your participation. So I think it's easier to get in now than it might be to get in later. And then they can see you grow. And a lot of these societies also have a lot of funding opportunities. So they have, all of them pretty much have travel grants for their national meetings, yearly meetings. So that's going to help you. But a lot of them also have like, you know, junior investigator awards. And so if you're getting in there and you're being a junior investigator, if you're getting a graduate poster at a graduate highlight symposium, you're really growing in this society, and they're watching you grow, and they take ownership of that, and they really, it's good for both ends. So if you want more suggestions on some societies, we can talk about that later. Women in Bio is a new one in the regional area that I've heard of that's really good, and it's more industry-based, but
I'm in Women in Bio.
Are you?
I highly
Yeah.
recommend it.
I'm in Women in Bio, but I haven't done many activities yet. But I know that they reach out to me on a weekly basis for activities. I just haven't had the time to do it. But I'm glad you're in it. You know, because that's going to start you in a regional area, and they have a national, you know, they have chapters, and so that it really helps open the doors for the more national meetings and societies. And did you have a question?
I was just, again, after looking at the CV this morning, including professional societies from undergraduate. Like I was in ODK, which was, you know, it's an honors society to be in, but at the same time, it's not something I'm doing now. So
Yeah.
it's just really just aligned.
Yeah, I've looked at, like I said, I've looked at some more tenure track CVs, and a lot of them do include some of the societies that they're no longer members of. And again, and I don't want to be a drunkard, but it is scope. So at this point in your career, that's maybe appropriate. I actually still have a lot of the societies from undergrad. They were national ones like AMSA, American Medical Students, you know, and I have a year, you know, but I was in those for 3 or 4 years. It was a huge commitment. So I feel like I don't want to take them off because it wasn't, you know, okay, if you have like every year you're in a different society, that might not be the best. But if you really put your time and effort into it, I would include it. Maybe when you get your tenure track position or whatever high position you're aiming for, then not, but at this point I think it's good. I still have it, so I can't say it's bad, I guess. Okay, so in this one, again, include your organization, and usually this is, so a lot of times you'll put your acronym here, like all of these are different societies, but they're like APS, ASPMB, but you probably will refer to them in your service section, your honors and awards section, et cetera, so you want to, you know, like when you write a paper, the first time you encounter this, acronym, put it there. So put American Society for Investigative Pathology, parentheses ASIP. Okay, so next would be the honors and awards section. So again, we can do the same kind of subsections we've done before with international, national, regional, and local. Again, title of awards, awarding organization, and years. This is a part where you can try to make yourself stand out. You might want to include a brief narrative with relevant information below each award that might describe the nature of the award and the number, maybe the number given. Because if you're just going to put, so I put a slice from my resume, right? I could just put here, I could put Ronald Huntington Award. Nobody outside of my small university knows what that is. But my university gave this out to one student every year, and that's a big deal if your graduating class is like 1,000. So you can include relevant information like that to help it stand out, because if you're just going to list them, it's nothing more than a list to the readers. So I wouldn't give paragraphs and paragraphs, try to limit it to 1 or 2 sentences, but it really could personalize your CV. Okay, so publications on a CV, there's a lot of different subsections you can include here, but again, only include the ones that apply to you. So as you grow in your scientific career, these sections will grow. You'll have more subsections and more titles. For CVs, you really are going to include all of them, all publications ever. So keep a running list. Remember, when you get a new publication, just put it right back on your CV. We're going to do reverse chronological order, so you're going to put it at number 1, the newest at number 1. So refereed articles would be like you wrote them or you were the PI on them. Reviews, published abstracts, which are different than like meeting abstracts. Published abstracts actually go in the journal for that society. Book chapters and other. You want to include all authors, obviously including yourself because you might not be first author. The year, title, and journal, and then identifying information. This is one of those points that some people argue on, but I really, the research says it's okay to put in press, but it's not okay to put in preparation. You could be in preparation from day 1 of your PhD degree for your paper, right? So it really gives no information. The difference between in press is that it has actually gone through the review process, and it's been accepted. You could put accepted there instead, and if it doesn't have like the year or whatever. If your article's maybe been reviewed and your like addressing reviewers' comments, maybe you can put in review, but in review is almost as much as in process, right? Because if you submit it to any journal, it's automatically in review, even if you get rejected. So just be cautious of those. When you do your publication list, you want to highlight or underline or bold your name in the publication, because a lot of times you're not going to be first. So make it easy for people to read. And you want to make sure all publications are in the same formatting style. So I think we're all pretty familiar with EndNote, and if you're not, you should find out how to use it. It's for automatic citations, and you can just copy and paste the citations from there. But you're going to want to do the citations or the publications in the format of the leading journal in your field. So me being in cell biology, excuse me, right now, I would do my formatting in like the Journal of Cell Biology. You could always do an NIH formatting, which would be pretty broad, but if you were doing epidemiology, it would be different than cell biology, than pathology, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to make it familiar for the reviewers. So professional activities. We alluded to this earlier, but you don't really want to include hobbies or interests that are unprofessional. Again, this could maybe open doors to criticism, and you don't need that on your CV. There's two major subsections. There's teaching and research. So this is really where your CV differs as a reflection of your level of experience, your level and experience. So this is where it's going to get longer and shorter, besides the publication section. So a brief overview of teaching. We all think of teaching as initially as courses, so if you're lucky enough to do adjunct or something, this is where you would put it. You want to include the dates of courses taught and the number of students and residents. So again, this can be one of those brief couple sentences or bullet points, whatever the CV lends itself to give more information. It would be a lot different if you were giving a lecture to 2 or 3 students in a higher level course or 100 students at a Gen Bio. They both have their advantages and disadvantages for your experience, so it would be good to identify those on your CV. You want to, like I said, include a brief description of relevant information when necessary. So also you could include a course description and your degree of independence in your role in organizing the course. If you were given this course, said here's the title, make it up yourself. You want to differentiate that from the course you were handed, you were given Gen Bio with all the lectures, because really this is adding to your portfolio of professional activities. You also, in this section, want to think outside the box. So besides courses, you can do lectures and seminars. A lot of PIs have these different divisions on their CVs, such as supervision of undergraduate and graduate students, service on thesis committees and training committees, and just supervision of different students. So next section in professional activities is research. The sections are pretty standard here. The subsections are pretty standard in this section. Grants are definitely included here. You can include a list of labs and also presentations or other research-related activities. So for grants, again, this is one of the most standard sections of the CV that have to have certain identifying information. So you want to have current and prior grant support. You want to have all the grant information, including your role in the project and percent effort, the source of funding, and total dollar amount. And this one, you're going to include, like publications, you include them all. Yes.
What about fellowships, like a pre-doc fellowship, where it's not?
So
there's not like a percent effort. I'm on a university training grant.
I would put that definitely in this section. If you can't put the information in there, don't. I think everybody understands if you're on that, in the more academic setting, they know how you got that. So just put as much information as you can. I guess this is more for senior PIs or even postdocs when you're getting, or like K awards, transition grants. But it would go in this section and just put as much information as possible, like a T, whatever, whatever number it is, and that kind of information. And so the funding, you could put the source of funding would be NIH. So there's a couple sections you can include. Yes?
Do you still put your role in a grant that you helped write even if you didn't get funded?
That's interesting. I don't think so, because it wouldn't.
Like I know, yeah, it wouldn't be as important, but I mean.
Yeah.
you helped write essentially.
I don't think so. Usually you wouldn't. A lot of times people, I've seen some grants with scores, where there's scores on there, but yeah, it's one of those things that, like I said, what have you done for me lately, or what, and if it hasn't been successful, I don't think it's going to be a positive addition, so unfortunately. And the fact is, usually if the grants are not funded, you're still working on funding them, so eventually there's going to be some way, shape, or form that this is going to be funded, so in that case, you should eventually get there, you hope. Okay, so list of labs. Most people at this stage can list a couple of these, and that's a good section. This will differ, again, with your experience, but maybe postdocs and grad students would have more information on their roles and projects and things like that. Tenure track positions might have more of a list and less techniques and skills, and so at this point I think it'd be a good section for you to expand on. So you want to include your title and be accurate. There's a difference between like a postdoc associate and a postdoc fellow, so you want to make sure you have the appropriate one on there. Add your advisor, because they're the ones that are funding you and they're recognizable. It can't hurt. The project in a few sentences, you can add a few sentences of description, but you want to use action verbs, because you did this work. You don't really want to say it in a passive way, because it's boring, and actives are going to get you. They're going to see you as more of a doer than a follower. So you can add skills and techniques and years inclusive here. And lastly, in professional activities, you can add research. For the research, you can have presentations related to research. And again, this is going to differ according to your stage. So the more senior PIs do a section on seminars and invited lectureships related to research. So this would be abstracts that you have oral presentations for, and talks at other institutions. For more junior scientists, you could put poster presentations, because you're contributing to the scientific society, but I think by the time you are on a tenure track or applying for jobs, you've probably done enough of those to have a certain amount that are oral presentations where you can take a lot of the posters out, because they become really repetitive if you have 4 pages of the same title from your graduate work, but just different years. That's fun. Okay, so last section would be service. So it's other related activities that you volunteer time for, but remember, related. So again, you can do subsections with the localization. Some good examples of this would be organizing committees, advisory boards, chair positions, judges, etc. Okay, so at the end of the CV talk, it's really important for you to understand you want to maintain and keep it current. Update your CV as you go. You're not going to remember every day what you did. If you had 2 or 3 publications last year, you might remember that, but you might not remember your service in those kind of subsections. CVs aren't just used for job applications. They're used for promotions, publications, grants. Oh wait, I'm sorry. So they are used for those. They're used for grants, promotions, awards, but you want to update as you go the promotions, publications, teaching lectures, etc. Especially when you're doing teaching, if you're doing a bunch at a time, it would be good to do it as you go. And this is the important part, which we're going to spend some time on now. I know we're running towards the end of the hour, so we'll try to speed up, but you really want to change the formatting of your CV or resume when necessary. An example of this is when you get hired at Pitt, you're going to want the Pitt School of Medicine format, and most schools will have that format for you. But also, you want to tailor your CV. So we're going to go over a little bit of tailoring your CV for different positions in academia, industry, and teaching, briefly. So again, we're going to start off with the concept of real estate. So when you're tailoring your CV for academia, the CV we went over from the School of Medicine is more or less the CV you're going to present in an academic situation. But in this case, you want to put research and research-related things towards the top. Emphasize your commitment to research in all aspects of your CV. So there's ways to write things which you emphasize what the reviewer of your CV wants to hear. And this is really where you want to have more research-related concepts. Again, this is the detailed CV, the long list, and we've talked about how it differs within the scope of your career path, whether you're applying for tenure track or after obtaining tenure. So another section you might be interested in would be industry, and this is really where we talked about earlier, your CV is not going to be appropriate, the academic CV for this setting. You're going to want to have what's called an industry CV, which again is this hybrid CV and resume, and you aim for not the one page of a resume, but like 2 or 3 pages. You want to remember that in these settings, most applications go to HR first. So most of them do keyword searches. So they're by computer, they're electronic, they're not personal. And you either have it or you don't. When your application is passed on or it's not. And a lot of these want it in a Word format so that they can do this. So just as a note here, make sure your formatting is simple enough where if you send it as a Word document, they're not like trying to get their computer to recognize all your formatting. Now this is what I'm talking about with keyword searches is there's going to be job postings for these positions, and basically what I've seen people do applying to these positions is you print out the posting and you print out your CV, you take the words, you integrate them. You don't want to like do a keyword section because that would be not as creative, and yes, you'll have the keywords there, but you're wasting your CV space. But there's some good examples. I brought some that I've got at other workshops if you're interested in industry positions. But when they say something like microbiology experience, you probably want to put microbiology somewhere if you have that experience in your CV, in your list of labs, in your research, or whatever portion that fits into. So it's really an art form, and this is maybe where your friends can help you out, but you definitely want to take the job posting and kind of check off the words, because that's where they're going to find their keywords. For industry, you want to choose descriptive headings, because again, this is this hybrid CV, and here's some examples of headings I've found that are relevant for industry CVs. The 2 I'm going to go over are going to be summary statement, because that's different than a CV, and the research experience. And again, as I mentioned before, when you do publications, you only want relevant articles, and it's like 2 or 3. So you're not going to put an article on C. elegans if they're doing something that's more drug related. If you have a publication that's more appropriate for their company, you would put that one on there. So when we talk industry CVs, your real estate at the top is going to be your summary statement. And this is unique to resumes and CVs. It's basically 1 or 2 sentences telling the employers what your most important qualifications are for the job, including your goals and your strengths. So it's giving them a synopsis of your resume so that you can give them more incentive to keep reading it. So all of them are going to require it, and I have some examples because industry CVs are not something I've prepared my own CV for, but I know others who have. So again, it's really an art form, and this is where you can maybe incorporate some more keywords, but it's really unique for the academic CV. Again, as we talked about before, it's not only what have you done for me lately, but what can you bring to the table. Especially in industry positions, they're a little closer to the to the general 9 to 5 kind of workforce where you're working for a big company and they want to know why they should hire you. Now, there's a really good article I read by Dr. Jensen, and he suggested using this approach when doing your industry CV. You can ask, what is the employer's scientific problem and how can you solve it? And he uses what's called a CAR approach, so it's challenge, approach, results. So this could be something you could outline in your research experience, especially with 3 bullet points, and it would really help them show that you're able to problem solve, and maybe you have some insight into something they're working on in their job posting is really good too. So I would definitely use the CARB approach. Again, the research experience is the 1 to 3 relevant skills, and you want to use the action verbs and include the project title, research description, responsibilities, and outcomes is especially important in the industry CV. So lastly, we'll go over the CV for teaching. For the real estate, you want to put your teaching experience closer to the top and emphasize your commitment to teaching in all aspects of your CV. There are additional sections when you apply to teaching positions, which I have a little information on. There's teaching statements are usually included with your teaching CV. The goal of a teaching statement is to communicate forethought about your career you're pursuing in an articulate way. Most times people who are actually applying to teaching positions don't have teaching experience, so you're not going to be able to give a lot of detail, but they want to make sure you know what you're getting into. So it's going to be 1 or 2 double-spaced pages, short and succinct, and well-written. Again, if you're going to apply for an undergraduate or some kind of teaching position and you have spelling errors or grammatical errors, it's not going to reflect highly on yourself. So these statements, I've really heard, are more of a filter than anything. They're really to weed out what they call bulk mail job searchers, which are the ones who just basically send out the exact same thing to every university. And they also show usually that if you write a sloppy statement, you might be a sloppy teacher. So these are ways that your CV is going to end up in the trash before it gets to the search committee. For the teaching statement, you really want to tailor it to the institution you're applying to, because again, you don't want to be a bulk mail applicant, and this includes the school and departmental goals. So I've written on here just an example. You can go to the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine website and you can look up their mission statement and incorporate these ideas into your teaching statement, and it would be more tailored to the institution you're applying for. You want to demonstrate a commitment to teaching even if you haven't had much experience. Commitment to research keeps teaching at cutting edge. So just because you're doing more research and teaching at this point doesn't mean you're not qualified for these jobs. You just have to spin it in the appropriate way. You want to highlight specific courses which you wish to teach. And some points that have been noted are you don't want to forget to include lower level students, because most people who write these statements are like, I want to teach the capstone research classes, and they forget that there's all levels of students, major and non-major, usually at these institutions. And you want to emphasize yourself, and in everything, I put it here, but you want to do this in every part of every CV. You want to be honest. You don't want to portray yourself as something different, because you're going to get to the interview and that's going to be apparent anyways. So be honest. Also, for the teaching statement, you want to emphasize a willingness to learn and change. Just because you are the teacher doesn't mean you can't be taught. And lastly, you want to reflect on personal experiences, which include your experiences as a student, a scholar, and a human. So emphasize maybe how certain experiences have influenced you to be applying for this position. And don't overpromise in any of these. Very last is the cover letters. We'll just go over this briefly because CVs usually come with the thought of applying somewhere, and a cover letter this would be a good venue to talk about it. These are personalized letters, and again, you don't want to do bulk mail form letters because really you want to tailor it to each position, and it will show more, again, more forethought into your application. Make sure you address it to the appropriate person or committee. And again, as we did with the mission statement on the teaching statements, you can address their company or school website to look for more specific information about where you're applying. No more than 1 page, 2 or 3 concise paragraphs. You want to remember, CVs are skimmed and cover letters are read. So if you're going to spend time, so you want to spend time on your cover letter. Not that you don't want to spend time on your CV, but you don't want to overlook this part of your application either. So things to include would be current position, job inquiry, reason for leaving, if applicable, area of interest, expertise, accomplishments, why you're a good fit, and other, you might want to include references. In this section, you don't want to be too personal again. You don't want to use too many I statements because that gets kind of annoying. And you really don't want to do negative statements about your current or previous positions. Yes, you might be switching positions, but that's not a venue to say, I don't like where I'm at, and et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't reflect good on your personality, so just avoid that. So we talked about this earlier, but just the last thing I want to say is besides scientific meetings and national meetings, there's other ways now to get your CV out there. And professional social networking has actually become a really huge thing. And I don't work for LinkedIn, but I would suggest everybody get a LinkedIn profile because I've known more peers to get jobs from this way than most other ways, and it's really surprising. And so you can use your tailored CV and actually upload it to this site, and it can help you with sectioning and stuff like that. So it's a wave of the future, professional social networking. So it appears to be very successful, and I would encourage everyone to be honest and in your profile, but make one, and you end up connecting to people that maybe will connect to other people, and your resume will flip to industries and professionals that you never thought you would you'd be able to give them to personally. Okay, so that's the end. I've listed where I've got my references, so if you want more information, a lot of these people have entire books on how to write a CV, so you can go to that. But if anyone is interested, I thought, since we've spent the first hour on just kind of the boring CV stuff, if anybody wants to stick around, we can do a roundtable review of our CVs. It's totally up to you, where we can apply what we learned here to looking at other people's CVs, and also maybe get something in return and have a critical eye on them. But thanks so much for coming, and if there's any more questions, I can answer those too.
I have a question.
Sure.
Where would you put, if you write blogs, would you put it under the presentations, would you just say blogs? Or not presentations, publications, and, because they're not peer reviewed, but they're out there.
True. Yeah, I mean, I think if you have the appropriate subheadings, definitely that would be a good area to put them in. If you're applying to something where that's really relevant, it would be considered a professional activity. That's a really broad section. I know there's research and grants, but other things can be put in there. So I'm not run into that. That's a good question. So I'm not positive, but if you definitely want it to stick out, I'd find a way to put it at the front and make it a professional activity.
So I don't know if you've seen anybody do this before. It's an idea I got from my husband that I've adapted, is to have underneath my education section, have a leadership section. And because there's a couple things that I've done that I really want to highlight and I don't want to bury.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't think of any other way to do it, so I just have a leadership section. I don't know if that's a place where you could put that you run your own blog too.
Yeah.
Or some kind of special experiences, or.
I know when I've written resumes really always have a leadership section. I'm surprised CVs don't have a clear leadership section, but I guess it's incorporated into a lot of other sections. But I would definitely make a section if that's something that's really a selling point for you.
What do you have in yours?
In my
In the leadership portion.
I developed a novel computer simulation, and I had no idea where to put it. And so I made a leadership section because I developed it on my own. I'm getting IRB approval on my own, and I'm running a research study on my own. And it's just definitely.
Well, you know, that could be not appointments and positions, but really, I mean, that more goes under more professional kind of activities. I mean, but it's really something to highlight, right?
Right.
So,
and I don't want to bury it. And
Yeah.
I'm actually on the National Committee for Young Women in Bio.
mhm.
Again, I don't want to bury that, and this is something I volunteer my time with, because I was invited to and appointed to that position.
Yeah, a lot of people do put those in service, though. I've looked at the tenure track positions, and their service sections are incredible because you think it's the last section, it's kind of like this filler section, but really, I took my graduate advisory, and he has like 4 pages of like every committee. I mean, he has like 1 line for organizing the entire national committee, which is incredible, and he still has like 30 pages. But maybe at your stage it's different, right? Because they're more not so common. So yeah, I maybe do a leadership section.
I don't know if that's really appropriate for leadership. You can do highlights, maybe. I just think leadership, because those fit in other places.
Yes. Leadership might be more like, I mean, even when you, like, I've organized conferences before, that goes in service, which is, you know, you want to put it somewhere else, but in the academic CV, there, you know, but yeah, that's, I'd probably put it not in like service, but like professional, but again, put it at the top of the professional near the top.
Because I have a hybrid CV resume that I'm working on for a position that I'm applying right now, so I do have it at the top.
Yeah, and you know, resumes are totally different than CVs too. Like I said, the sections are really going to reflect where you're applying to or what the employer is interested in. And in that one, leadership might be the appropriate heading.
I have a question about putting the posters that we presented.
Mm-hmm.
There's one topic I presented 3 times at 3 different places, and I have to change the name of the title, but it's basically the same thing. So should I just keep one, or can I include all the 3 different?
I mean, like I said, it depends on what other things you have. Maybe that would be something where you try to get them in single lines so it didn't take up as much space. But I mean, like with my resume for years, I had them all on there. They're the same poster with the same title, but different spots. But eventually, you get to a point where maybe there's other professional activities you can add. In that case, you know, like I said, I might maybe put the poster title and the sub bullets under it, like presented it level, you know, each one, to try to minimize the space, because I know the way that mine's formatted, and I don't say that mine's anywhere near perfect, and I need to change my formatting because it's way too complicated. But like I had them in like this, where they were going, and the title sort of in the middle, and then I was having 3 pages of the same title, and I think there's other ways to present it that are more consistent.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just one title and one paragraph.
Any other questions? You want to do that?
So if we have questions in the future regarding the CV, who should we approach? Like we proofread ours.
I put my email. I'm always more than happy. I'm not an expert, but I can help.
Okay.
Your PIs might be too busy, so I try to take a senior person in your lab, or maybe more of an administrative. I know, like in certain departments, there's some more administrative, higher level research persons, and they might be able to do it. Or maybe somebody like who does the hiring in your department, if you can ask them, because they've seen a bunch, they have opinions.
But the university doesn't have anything
We
like
can ask the postdoc office or whatever.
Yeah, the Postdoc Association might. I know they have them for grants, so I don't know if they have them for CVs.
Well, they have there's the Office of Professional Development or whatever it's called, and they I would think that would
Yeah.
be something that they would help with.
But I mean, I'd start with your peers for the general, and go up the ladder because they've probably seen more,
Sure.
and they can give you more insight.
Thank you.